The 1986 Space Shuttle Challenger tragedy included the first American civilian and 6 other astronauts. NASA encountered mechanical problems on this flight which resulted in tragedy witnessed by the public. It's possible that NASA staff saw some sort of issue with the Challenger before liftoff because of the bitter, cold weather. However, they still chose to launch the shuttle anyway in an attempt to save face, resulting in the loss of 7 lives. This just goes to show that it is better to be safe and call a mission off than regret the loss of innocent lives on an expedition. People don't watch the shuttle liftoffs like they watch the Super Bowl. People look for the dangerous factor. But when shuttles lift off, people don't think of how dangerous it really is or can be. Only when the Challenger crashed with the first civilian teacher on it was when people had started to pay more attention. NASA needs to make it known that there is always a possibility that something could go wrong on the shuttle. According to the article, Launching into Unethical Behavior, Lessons from the Challenger Disaster, NASA engineers have had experiences with ordnance ring, otherwise known as O-ring malfunctions before. 7 out of 24 shuttles that NASA launched have had O-ring problems, but none resulted in a disaster so great. An O-ring is similar to a rubber seal, and it's used to seal parts of the rockets on the sides of the shuttle together. The rings were not correctly sealed on this particular expedition, and therefore, hot propellant gases were leaking out and burning the joint insulation, grease, and rubber O-rings in the joint seal. This is part of the reason that the scientists think the Challenger disaster happened.
3, 2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
Control program. Roger, roll, Challenger. Challenger, go with throttle up. Roger, go with throttle up.
My controllers here looking very carefully at the situation. Obviously a major malfunction.
This expedition, in general, was supposed to be an exploration for the first civilian to be on a shuttle trip. Krista McAuliffe was about to explore outer space for the first time, and unfortunately, her last. She is remembered, and so are all of her crew members. But the fact that they all lost their lives during their exploration was devastating. Even today, people are finding out what actually happened to the space shuttle and the crew, and to find out if they were still alive during the crash, that is, until the shuttle had hit the water. Then, after only 73 seconds, the whole crew's exploration was over.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd planned to speak to you tonight to report on the State of the Union. But the events of earlier today have led me to change those plans. Today is a day for mourning and remembering. Nancy and I are pained to the core by the tragedy of the Shuttle Challenger. We know we share this pain with all of the people of our country. This is truly a national loss. 19 years ago, almost to the day, we lost 3 astronauts in a terrible accident on the ground. But we've never lost an astronaut in flight. We've never had a tragedy like this. And perhaps we've forgotten the courage it took for the crew of the shuttle. But they, the Challenger 7, were aware of the dangers, but overcame them and did their jobs brilliantly. We mourn 7 heroes: Michael Smith, Dick Scobie, Judith Resnick, Ronald McNair, Ellison Onizuka, Gregory Jarvis, and Krista McAuliffe.
The Challenger, ported in Florida, had lifted off, and then in the process of flying, about 73 seconds into flight, it broke apart and became a fireball in the sky. Many stories have been made up out of it, and most people who were present during this tragedy have remembered it like it was yesterday. All 7 members aboard were killed, and they are remembered to this day. This tragedy was an encounter, and an example of this was when the shuttle first started lifting off. People had said after they saw the fire starting, the hydrogen and other gases caught on fire, and that is how the shuttle exploded. The astronauts encountered troubles with the craft, but at the time, they weren't enough to be noticeable. The people who were watching didn't figure out the problem until they saw a big fireball in the sky and something falling. According to Space Shuttle Challenger Disaster 25 years later, the article says, NASA Space Shuttle Challenger exploded and broke apart just after liftoff, killing 7 astronauts, including civilian teacher Krista McAuliffe, in one of the worst space disasters in U.S. history. This shows that because it happened so quickly and there were 7 people on board, the fact that it was broadcasted live was awful. When the NASA engineers explored the space shuttle before liftoff, they recommended that it shouldn't be launched. This was because, in the past, O-ring failures were associated with very cold temperatures, and the day of this launch was very cold. Thus, scientists assumed that the O-rings were likely to malfunction. According to Roger Boisley, a former NASA engineer, NASA personnel did not want to cancel the launch, so they did not listen to the engineer's warning. The fact that NASA personnel let the launch go through was one of the reasons why we remember this today. Because the warnings were ignored, and NASA ignored its own safety-first rule, the Challenger disaster happened, lives were lost, and a lesson was learned.